this, as we get into the specifics of sales, you're going to get a lot of people that say no, right? This is sales. Most people are going to say no in any given scenario. Most of the time, you're going to, on your best day. But if we think statistically, that doesn't matter. You don't need to have everybody say yes. If you can make $2,000 on one job, you literally would stop working if everybody said yes, right? Hopefully not, but probably so. So let's talk about different strategies to actually get the person to come closer to giving you a yes. So when we're talking about door-to-door sales, cold sales, basically, there's a couple strategies that we can use over and over that are bankable strategies, we'll call them, because they work over and over. And then there's other strategies that might work 1 in 100, less likely to work, but still can work in some circumstances. So do you guys know what the difference is between warm sales and cold sales?
Cold sales, like the person they come there to get anything or whatnot, and then hot sales is they're there to get something and you get a lot out of it.
Right? Does that make sense, Brian?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So by definition, a cold sale, the person has not come in and said they needed the product, right? They're doing something completely different. You're opening up this cold sale. They are totally ice cold to what you're presenting, in which case, in a cold sale scenario, and this just basically flips in warm sales, but we're going to talk about cold sales. So how resistant is a person to buying a $10,000 roof from you today, Brian, if you knock on their door and they don't know you're coming? On a scale of 1 to 100, how resistant do you think they are?
They're going to be really resistant. Maybe, I'm not going to say 100, probably like in the 90s.
Right, very close to 100. At least 80, maybe in the 90s, their resistance is. Have you ever had somebody come to your door to sell you something before?
No.
You haven't? You have, Jeffrey? So tell us about that. How did you feel, first of all?
Well, it depends on like what they're asking for. Like lately I've had a lot of direct TV and dish and everything else like that. And I'm like, well, if I already have your product, why should I buy more?
Right, what do they say to that?
They don't know what to say. I got one person answer.
Right? If they could drop your rates, maybe you'd be interested, but otherwise you already got the product, right? So most people react with a huge amount of resistance to door-to-door sales or cold sales in general. What do you think the best way to get that resistance to come down is? How do you get somebody's, that wall, people talk about the wall. They've got the wall up. What's that?
Try to get them to know them personally, like their name or something.
Sure, you got to break down that wall by getting to know them personally, right? How do you get their name?
Try to introduce yourself, say, hi, my name is this, and your name.
Right, that's one way. Introduce yourself and just flat ask them for their name. Anything else? What's another way to get the resistance to come down, Brian?
I don't know if the product you're selling is like, if they need it.
They have to need the product, right? Otherwise, you're kind of wasting your time. And we'll talk later about qualifying. If they're not qualified to buy the product you're offering, you've wasted your time. Although, when you first knock on your door, I wouldn't worry as much about that as I would just worry about getting the resistance down. Have you guys ever heard of the bestseller, this book? It's been on the bestseller list for like 80 years, the Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. You've heard of that, Jeffrey? Have you read it? No. What about Brian? Have you heard of this book? Haven't heard of it? So the philosophy of this book, the general underlying philosophy is that everybody on the planet, every single person walking around this planet wants to talk about one thing. Guaranteed. Never changes.
Themselves.
They want to talk about themselves. Right? What do they not want to talk about, Jeffrey?
Your product.
Your product or you?
Yeah.
Yourself, right? So even introducing yourself, I would take that right out. How do you get a person to talk about themselves? Ask them questions, right? What kind of questions can you ask a person to drop the resistance and gain a little bit of ground to be able to sell them your product? What kind of questions can you ask?
It's like something common.
How their day was, maybe. It might go over a little bit creepy. Dang, Gabe, will you tag me on that customer you said needs the... We'll ask Caitlin. I gave her a bunch. What does she have, 100?
Doesn't have any Visa, we just got like Starbucks now.
Can I just write a check? Who's the customer?
Jennifer Graham.
Oh, okay.
Her homeowner, they started the build late, so it had to run in 2 days, and she's the newborn, so I totally put her out, so I told her I get her a gift card.
Okay, did you get the final on it?
Hey.
Oh, okay. Nice. So we're going to talk about asking questions and the specific type of questions that will work. And really, this is less of the how was your day than maybe something like how long have you lived here? You know, this is a beautiful house. Do you do the maintenance yourself? How do you like the neighborhood? Right? How about how old is the roof? Any other questions you guys can think of? To just drop the resistance.
Have you checked your house somewhere since the February 24th when the last hailstorm was hit?
That's a great question, right? Have you had your house checked out since the last storm that hit? How do most people answer that kind of a question?
They're like, they usually will say no.
Does it really matter if they say no, you're good? If they say yes, you're good, right?
Yeah.
That's a great question. That's a really good question. So anything that's going to kind of get the homeowner thinking a little bit about the sale potentially, and that's going to move side. But the resistance is more, you know, how's the neighborhood? How long have you lived here? This is a beautiful house. Do you do the maintenance yourself? Let's say you knock on somebody's door and a little kid comes running out and they jump on their skateboard or their little scooter or something like that. What's something that you could say?
It's nice to say, compliment them about their kid.
Right, and of course you're going to be careful about this because you creep somebody out real quick, right? Yeah. Might say something like, "Oh, wow, he's pretty good on that skateboard," or let's say the kid has a full outfit on and a baseball bat. What could you say?
Some play baseball.
Oh, what position does he play? Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I used to play baseball. Right? That's called building rapport and dropping the resistance. This is going to get a person to talk about themselves because we're basically operating the philosophy that everybody, when you knock on their door, they want to talk about themselves. They don't want to talk about you. They don't want to know about your product. We're going to have to ask questions that qualify them to buy the product, but we're really going to have to start out with some rapport building questions. Okay, what about urgency? So there's really only two categories here. The first one, of course, is the drop the resistance, build the rapport. The second one is the urgency. So let's say we go knock on somebody's door today, Brian, and they don't know we're coming, of course, and we want to sell them a $10,000 roof. What do you think the urgency is to sign that contract for a $10,000 roof is today? On a scale of 0 to 100.
Most of the time they want to talk about it with the wives, figure finances and whatnot, so it's not like they want to do it.
That's not